A few months ago, I made a video on how to use your iPad as a wireless monitor. And one of the pieces of gear that made that possible was a wireless HDMI transmitter and receiver. Now, if you were to copy that exact setup, it's not necessarily the cheapest option because that transmitter and receiver costs about 400 bucks. But today, I have an alternate option for you, which is really a fraction of the price. And this is the Shimbol, I believe that's how you say the name, TP Mini, and it's also a wireless transmitter and receiver, but these only cost 89 bucks. So taking a look at these, they're almost identical. I mean, the only way I've been able to tell these apart is if you look on the side. The receiver has RX engraved at the bottom, and I don't know if the camera's gonna pick that up. And the transmitter has TX engraved at the bottom. But you really only can see these if the light hits it at the right angle. And also on the other side, the transmitter has HDMI in and HDMI out, and the receiver has 2 HDMI out ports. But again, you have to look at the engraving, which you only can see if the light hits it at a certain angle. So I do wish there was an easier way to tell them apart, but I'm sure you'd get used to it. So I want to quickly show you how I'm going to have this set up, and then we'll go outside and test the range. All right, so this is my setup, and I'm gonna go ahead and break it down so you can see exactly what's going on. So right here, we have the camera with an HDMI cable coming out and plugging into the transmitter. Okay, on this side, we have the receiver, an HDMI cable, and right here is an adapter that converts this HDMI signal to USB Type-C so that my iPad can read it. But you don't need to do it this way. You don't need an iPad. You really can use this HDMI cable and connect it to anything that takes that signal. But this is just the way that I'm gonna do it. And also to power the transmitter and receiver, I'm using 2 Sony NP batteries. All right, so the way I did this range test was to just walk away from the receiver and see at what point it starts to glitch or disconnect. I had the receiver set up on the iPad and one of my cameras pointed at it. And this isn't like a super technical test, but I chose this football field because I felt like it would be easier to measure the distance. And look, I know the footage on the iPad is kind of shaky, but that's not the point of the test. But what I found is at about the 40-yard mark, it seemed to really start to glitch and it would progressively get worse as I got further. But I do want to point out that at no point did it completely disconnect, even when I got all the way down to the other end of the field, and I think that's something worth mentioning. I set this up right here so you can get an idea of the latency as we go through the pros and cons. Starting with the pros, obviously the price, it's a great deal. And I like the simplicity of it. Essentially, you can plug it in and it's good to go. The small size is also a positive for me, and it can be powered through USB Type-C. So if you do it this way, instead of using an NP battery, then you really can take advantage of that smaller footprint. Also, I would say the range is good, at least for me and the way I would use it. I'd say it's solid for about 100 feet, and after that point, you might start running into glitches or connection issues. Now I want to get to the cons. Starting with the appearance, it's one of those things where it's either you like it or you don't. If you're someone who's particular about how your rig looks, then maybe the bold red throws it off. Secondly, I don't know if it's just my unit, but the top HDMI out on the receiver is a little finicky. Like, I have to play with the cable to try and get a solid connection, and even then it may not be 100% stable. But the bottom HDMI works just fine, so that's the one that I use. So I actually wanted to try this again without the iPad setup and also with the different HDMI. And what I found is when it's like this and you're not moving things around, it's completely fine. But if I start to play with this cable a little bit, you'll see it disconnects and reconnects. But if I plug it into the bottom one, then it's completely fine. If it is just my unit, then that's a good thing, but it could bring up the question of long-term durability. But I will say the way everything is constructed and how it feels, it's solid. Another thing I want to point out is that with the image that's outputted on the receiver, every now and then you get like this horizontal glitch line. It's kind of hard to explain, but I'll try and show it to you. Basically, the best way I could describe this, let's say you have two halves. So one above the glitch line and one below it. It seems like one of those is being outputted slightly before or after the other half. And so visually, your eye catches that and it may stand out. Something else I want to mention is that when I rig up my camera, I normally go from my camera to my monitor, which is the Ninja 5 Plus. And if I'm going to use a transmitter, I'll go from the Ninja 5 to the transmitter. But when I do it this way, I normally have a problem with the connection, like it just won't work. And I haven't found a reliable solution to that problem. I'll just unplug it and plug it back in until it works, or try other methods of turning things off and turning it back on. But when I plug it directly from the camera to the transmitter, it works just fine. So taking in these pros and cons, me personally, I think it's worth it. The $89 price tag really does help, because let's say it was $50 more, I'm not sure I would have the same stance. Now, at the time that I'm making this video, this product has not officially released, and when I go on B&H, it says that you can pre-order it, so it should be available soon. And of course, I'll leave links down in the description. The company did reach out to me to check it out, and when I was at NAB, I went and picked it up, so that's how I got mine. But if you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and drop this a like, jump down in the comments, let me know what you think, and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. It only takes a second, and I will see y'all real soon in my next one. Peace.